Before European maps, before treaties, the Pawnee and their neighbors drew boundaries with observation, patience, and memory. What would you do if your home, your hunting ground, was contested this way? Comment your answer. 1200 AD, heart of the Great Plains, modern-day Kansas, USA. The sun hovers low, casting long shadows across a sea of waving grasses. The wind carries the faint scent of smoke and earth. A distant drumbeat carried from a neighboring village echoes across the valley. Near the tippies, children chase each other in loops, their laughter mixing with the clatter of pots and drying hides flapping in the breeze. A young scout kneels, eyes narrowed, scanning the horizon where dust rises. An approaching group, strangers perhaps, or a rival hunting party. A single decision made today, one encounter, could redraw the invisible lines of territory, mark the boundaries of power, and etch this moment into the memory of the land. Where exactly are we? What time is this, and what unfolds just beyond our sight, waiting to shape the destiny of those who call these plains home? The year is 1200 AD. The vast plains stretch endlessly, a rolling sea of grass under the pale sun. To the untrained eye it is serene, but the land hums with invisible currents of power. Here, on what would centuries later become modern-day Kansas, multiple tribal confederacies navigate a delicate balance of authority, trade, and survival. Political forces shape the horizon long before any European sets foot on these lands. The Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee peoples control distinct territories, each defined by rivers, hunting grounds, and sacred hills. Alliances shift like the wind. One village pledges support to another, only to withdraw months later when the bison herds move elsewhere, or a neighboring chief asserts dominance. Diplomacy is written in gestures, exchanges of goods, and shared ceremonies, but threats lie always nearby, subtle yet ever present. Economically, the plains are alive with movement. Trails of horses and dogs laden with hides, maize, and dried meat trace the veins of the continent. Trade is both lifeline and leverage. Shells, flint, and obsidian move westward. Salt and smoked bison meat move eastward. Control of these trade routes grants a village influence far beyond its numbers. A chieftain who controls a crossing point of rivers can determine who thrives and who must relocate. Resources are finite, a drought one season, a failed hunt the next, and entire communities can face hunger-weakening political alliances. Social structures are intertwined with these forces. Kinship ties dictate who may speak in council, who may lead war parties, and who may claim hunting grounds. Every birth, every marriage, every ceremonial offering carries weight. Yet the rising pressure of migration, neighboring tribes moving westward, due to encroachment, disease, or intertribal disputes, begins to crack the stability. Communities that once coexisted now compete for bison water and fertile soil. Displacement is not only a consequence of war, but also of necessity, and necessity often demands choice. Hard choices made by leaders with limited options. Disease, too, shadows the plains, subtle yet devastating. While the major epidemics associated with Europeans have not yet arrived, illnesses travel along trade routes. Smallpox, influenza, and other ailments move quietly among traders and migrating families. Mortality rises, populations shrink, and with them political leverage shifts. A village weakened by sickness may lose control of a crossing seed hunting grounds or submit to another confederacy's demands. In addition to internal pressures, rumors of distant European lands percolate slowly along trade lines. While no European colonists have set foot here, exchanges with distant groups bring hints of new goods, exotic beads, and stories of strange peoples across vast oceans. These whispers influence decisions, which alliances to honor, which enemies to monitor, which trade networks to strengthen. Though subtle, these external pressures begin to color the map even before ships arrive. The convergence of these factors, political maneuvering, economic necessity, social obligations, and the creeping threat of disease creates a tense landscape. Territories that once seemed fixed become negotiable, fluid, fragile. The rivers, hills, and valleys of the plains are no longer just geography. They are markers of influence, contested lines on an invisible map. Every decision a chief makes, every movement a hunting party undertakes, redraws these boundaries. The land itself bears witness to shifts that will echo for centuries. As the seasons turn, the stage is set for a confrontation that will mark the memory of these plains. A neighboring tribe's movement to new hunting grounds, a disputed access point to a river, a trade agreement gone wrong, any of these could ignite conflict. The map cracks. A fissure in authority appears. What was once stable now teeters. Power shifts in subtle, almost imperceptible ways, but the implications are immediate. Communities must respond, defend, adapt, or risk being erased from the landscape entirely. The question looms unspoken yet pressing: which forces are moving fastest? which alliances will hold, which will fracture, and how will these ripples of politics, trade, and survival shape the lives of those who walk the plains today and those who will inherit its stories tomorrow? Every council meeting, every dispatched scout, every seasonal hunt becomes part of a larger narrative. The map of influence, the invisible lines of authority, is already changing. Observers might see only grass and horizon, but those who live here know the balance of power teeters. And a single misstep, a poorly judged encounter, could redraw the map entirely. History in this place is being written silently, but decisively. In the heart of the plains there is a figure whose eyes trace the horizon with a mixture of curiosity and caution. He is Tayanita, a young scout of the Pawnee, recently come of age at 13 winters. Neither child nor fully adult, yet tasked with responsibilities that weigh as heavily as any warrior's. Tayanita's family is rooted deep in the grasslands. His father, a respected hunter, leads seasonal hunts and oversees exchanges with neighboring villages. His mother tends to the clan's store of dried maize preserves and hides, ensuring every family has sustenance through the unpredictable winters. Tayanita's older sister helps with ceremonial preparations, beadwork offerings to the spirits, and guidance for younger children. He moves within this network, learning early the delicate balance of cooperation and vigilance that sustains the tribe. At dawn, he shoulders his bow, light carefully crafted strung with sinew from the previous year's bison, and a quiver of arrows tipped with flint. Every notch on the bow's handle carries a story, a hunt survived, a bison felled, a lesson in patience. He tightens the leather strap across his chest and steps lightly across the trampled grasses, silent as a shadow. The world of adults watches him in expectation. The world of spirits whispers lessons that only attentive eyes can interpret. His first test had come just last summer. The Pawnee were forced to relocate temporarily after a neighboring Osage hunting party moved westward, encroaching upon a favored bison route. Tayanita had been sent ahead with his older cousin to scout the terrain, observe the Osage movements, and report back. The trek had taken 3 suns each, hotter than the last. Sand burned his feet, prairie grass cut his calves, and the distant rumble of a thunderstorm reminded him of the uncontrollable forces of nature. Yet he had observed, noted, and returned unharmed, bringing information that shaped the council's decisions for the season. From that day, he was no longer just a boy following elders. He carried responsibility. He carried influence. Tayanita's motivation is rooted in survival and belonging. He seeks to prove himself not through violence alone, but through knowledge, observation, and the subtle art of reading land and people. He wants to understand which paths are safe, which alliances hold, and which rivalries could erupt at any moment. His fears are grounded in loss, losing the trust of his family, the safety of his village, the paths that allow life to continue on these plains. Every misstep could bring hunger, displacement, or death. His morning routine reveals both the simplicity and the complexity of life on the plains. He checks the animal traps set near the creek, noting which snares have been taken, which birds have been caught, and whether any bison tracks are approaching. He observes the flight of hawks overhead, the way wind shifts the grasses, and how the distant hills might conceal approaching parties. Each observation informs his decisions. Each decision shapes the choices of others. Even as a scout, Tayanita is acutely aware of the political web surrounding him. He knows of the alliances between Pawnee and Kanza, the occasional skirmishes with the Osage, and the delicate truces enforced through trade of beads, furs, and maize. A misjudged path, a careless report could unravel agreements painstakingly maintained for generations. Yet Tayanita moves forward. His small frame, nimble and quiet, belies the weight he carries. The objects he carries with him tell stories as vivid as any council discussion. A small carved pendant hangs around his neck, gift from his grandmother, a talisman for safe passage, protection against spirits and enemies alike. His bow, worn from use, bears scratches and dents from lessons learned on previous hunts. Each arrow is fletched with feathers from birds he has followed for days, feathers carefully chosen for balance and accuracy. These are not mere tools. They are extensions of his responsibility, reminders of lineage, and symbols of the trust placed in him by those who came before. As the day unfolds, he observes a distant group moving along the ridge. Dust rises in thin columns. Are they Osage hunters or another Pawnee scouting party returning from the north? He crouches, noting the direction of the wind, the positioning of the sun. Subtle gestures, movement of hands, angle of spears, the timing of footsteps, communicate intentions without words. Knowledge is power, and Tayanita knows this. He returns to the village as dusk approaches. Fires are lit in ceremonial alignment, smoke curling upward in spirals that will carry prayers to the spirits. The elders gather, listening to Tayanita's report, weighing the details of what he saw, what he inferred, what he fears. He speaks carefully, neither exaggerating nor understating, knowing the council's decisions will ripple through families, hunting grounds, and trade paths. The balance of peace and the safety of all may hinge on a boy's observations. Through Tayaniti, we understand the stakes not as abstract notions, but as lived experience. His desires, fears, and responsibilities give shape to the broader narrative: the negotiation between tribes, the competition for resources, the navigation of shifting alliances, and the constant attention required to survive. In his small figure running silently across vast grasslands, we see the convergence of personal and communal, of survival and diplomacy, of youth and leadership. And yet he is aware even at this age that the horizon holds more than what the eye can see. The movements of others, the unseen currents of power, and the changing patterns of the land all demand vigilance. Who controls the rivers today may yield tomorrow. Who is friend today may become rival tomorrow. Tayanita's path is both literal and symbolic. The boy who guides, observes, and reports is also the one who will bear the memory of what the plains once were, and what they are on the verge of becoming. In following him, we ask, what drives this boy forward? What does he hope to preserve? What does he fear losing? And whose story does he carry across the plains? Through Tayanita, the audience sees that history is not only recorded in council meetings and treaties, but in the eyes of those who walk the land, who watch and interpret every ripple, every movement, and every shadow. Spring 1202 AD, near the banks of the Republican River, Central Great Plains, modern-day Nebraska-Kansas border. The morning air is crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and the lingering smoke of last night's fires. Tayanita, the young Pawnee scout, moves cautiously along the riverbank bow, slung over his shoulder, arrows fletched and ready. His heart hammers not from exertion, but from a growing unease he cannot yet name. The elders' council had met late into the previous night, voices low and deliberate. The news they bore now weighs like stone. A distant dust cloud rises over the western ridge. The Osage hunting party has returned, but this time not in casual pursuit of bison. They move with purpose, their banners of furs and painted staffs visible against the rising sun. There is no greeting, no exchange. Instead, their advance signals an assertion, a claim to hunting grounds long considered neutral, sacred, and necessary for the Pawnees' survival. Within the village, tension thickens the air. Mothers hurry to secure dried maize. Children are pulled from play, and the village dogs grow restless, sensing the unfamiliar energy rippling through the grass. Tayanita's father gathers hunters and scouts, whispering instructions: observe, avoid confrontation if possible, but be ready to defend. The tribe's survival for the season at least depends on immediate coordinated action. The council had not anticipated this. The Osage movement came faster than expected, prompted by a combination of their own dwindling resources and the shifting allegiances of neighboring tribes. A long-standing agreement, unwritten yet respected, has been broken. Boundaries once marked by rivers and sacred hills are now contested, and the Pawnee, caught in the flux, must respond or risk displacement. Tayanita's own task is urgent. He is sent to verify the size and direction of the Osage group. Each step is calculated. One misstep could reveal the Pawnee positions, tip the balance of power, or spark violence prematurely. The dust rises, the sun glares off weapons and armor like hides, and the scouts whisper warnings to one another, eyes scanning for the slightest movement. Within hours, the village feels the ripple. Hunters are recalled from the northern plains. Women and elders reinforce temporary shelters. Ceremonial fires are adjusted to signal readiness and alertness. Even the youngest children sense the shift. Games cease, laughter fades, and eyes follow every shadow. The balance of daily life tilts instantly. Nothing is routine anymore. The Osage do not attack immediately, but their presence is a declaration. A single breach of territory, or even the perception of one, can escalate quickly. Trade routes must be monitored, livestock movement recalculated, paths to water sources secured. Families huddle closer at night, fires burning long into the early hours, whispering prayers to protect not just life, but the continuity of their traditions, their songs, their stories. Tayanita observes patterns from the ridge. The Osage hunters are methodical, probing the Pawnee boundaries as if testing the limits, mapping the land with their own steps. The young scout reports this to his father, who relays it to the council. Immediate decisions are made. Some families relocate to temporary shelters farther east, while hunting parties adjust their routes to avoid confrontation, yet maintain sustenance. Every movement is both survival and strategy. By midday, the tension has coalesced into decisive action. Arrows are readied, but no shots are fired, yet. Fires burn brighter and the ceremonial ring drums pound slowly to signal vigilance. The elders consult, weighing the implications of direct conflict against withdrawal. The tribe knows that once action is taken, the consequences will ripple beyond the current season. Alliances may be tested. Neighboring tribes will observe, and the invisible map of influence across the plains will shift. The effect on daily life is immediate. Children learn early the meaning of vigilance. Mothers ration supplies with careful foresight. Scouts like Tyanita carry news warnings and guidance constantly. The entire village operates as a network, responsive, adaptive. Survival becomes a collective choreography. Even the natural world reacts. Bison herds, sensing human tension, move differently across the plains. Hawks circle higher, scanning for disturbance. The wind carries not just scent but rumor. The landscape itself becomes a player in this unfolding story. Paths that were safe yesterday may be dangerous tomorrow. Water holes that sustained life may be contested. Every decision, every movement, every breath is significant. The pivotal moment, the Ngoin know, is not a clash of weapons, but a breach of boundaries and trust. The Osage assertion, though bloodless initially, forces immediate mobilization. It is a signal to all Pawnee families: your routines are no longer yours alone. Your movements, your choices, your very presence will influence the unfolding map. The plains, expansive and seemingly empty, have become a stage of strategy, survival, and diplomacy. By sunset, the village has adjusted. Families settle in temporary encampments. Patrols are rotated. Young scouts, including Tyanita, are positioned to observe and report throughout the night. Every eye is alert. Every ear attuned to sound. Every footstep noted. The village survives this day, but they know that the breach once revealed will echo beyond the immediate horizon. The consequences are immediate, tangible, and undeniable. Routes to water and game are altered. Families sleep apart from their usual neighbors. Resources are consumed more cautiously. The map of influence, both seen and unseen, is subtly but irrevocably redrawn. Decisions made now will resonate in the days, months, and years to come. What forces have pushed them to act? How will alliances shift? And which choices will preserve life, culture, and tradition on the plains? Today, the spark has ignited. The trajectory of the Pawnee and the balance of power among neighboring tribes has changed forever. Early summer, 1202 AD, along the bluffs overlooking the Republican River, central Great Plains, modern-day Nebraska. The Pawnee encampment stretches across the lower plains. Teepees clustered strategically near the river, smoke spiraling upward from ceremonial and cooking fires. Families move cautiously, children guided away from the periphery, elders consulting in hushed tones. Across the distant ridge, the Osage group advances, silent but deliberate, their movements traced by glints of sunlight on spears and woven hides. The objective is clear for both sides. The Pawnee aim to protect sacred hunting grounds, secure access to water and grazing routes for their herds, and maintain the integrity of their seasonal villages. For the Osage, the incursion asserts claims over contested territories, allows access to prime bison paths, and tests Pawnee response, measuring both vigilance and resolve. The land itself dictates strategy. The Republican River cuts the plains like a silver ribbon, bordered by steep bluffs on either side. Pawnee scouts, Tyanita among them, know every curve, every hidden bend, every patch of tall grass that can conceal movement. On the riverbank, sandbars provide crossing points shallow enough for canoes or hurried foot traffic, yet easily monitored from above. Hills and ridges create natural observation posts, but also blind spots. Even the wind matters. Dust blown from the west can mask movement, carry scent, or betray a party's approach. The Pawnee establish a cordon along likely Osage approach routes, spacing hunters and scouts at intervals informed by prior observations. Drums are kept silent. Signals are subtle, a raised hand, a small flag of woven grass to communicate position or alert. The Osage, advancing with measured cadence, probe these defenses, sending small parties to test reaction, while larger groups hold back, ready to exploit any weakness. By midday, a critical moment unfolds. A group of Osage hunters veers unexpectedly along a ridge thought to be secure by the Pawnee. They are spotted by Tyanita, who notes the deviation and reports to his father. The council convenes immediately. The ridge's vantage point is essential. If the Osage secure it, they can observe the village, anticipate hunting movements, and pressure Pawnee negotiations. The Pawnee act swiftly. Hunters shift positions, families are moved behind temporary barricades made from stacked hides and logs, and the elders adjust ceremonial fires to signal readiness without revealing exact numbers. Every movement is deliberate, every decision weighs risk and reward. A miscalculation could cost lives. The first point of contact is subtle, a misinterpreted shadow, a startled deer, a branch snapping underfoot. Osage scouts, seeing the movement, assume they have been detected and retreat slightly, prompting a response from Pawnee hunters. Arrows are not yet loosed. Instead, tension thickens. A ballet of positioning, observation, and silent communication plays out across the grasslands. The terrain shapes every action. A low-lying marsh near the river forces the Osage right flank to slow, leaving their left exposed. Pawnee observers exploit this, signaling hunters to adjust their positions. A misstep, stepping into the marsh, losing footing, could reveal the Pawnee's presence or trigger an unplanned clash. Every ridge, every slope, every bend of the river is a potential pivot in the unfolding strategic play. Mid-afternoon brings the pivotal XOA moment. An Osage scout, misjudging the Pawnee's vigilance, moves too close to the bluff's edge. From above, Tyanita signals with a raised feathered arrow. Pawnee hunters reposition, enclosing the Osage in a semicircle without revealing full strength. The Osage realize too late they have been funneled into a narrow corridor along the riverbank. A hasty retreat begins. Confusion spreads among their ranks, and the Pawnee gain the advantage. The consequences are immediate. One Osage hunter falls, his ankle caught in marsh reeds. Others lose time and cohesion. Pawnee families watching from a safe distance understand the significance. Territory remains under control. Resources are secured, and the message is clear. Boundaries are defended with precision and foresight. The Osage withdrawal reshapes the power map of the area, if only temporarily. Yet, the ripple is felt across neighboring villages, influencing future encounters, alliances, and disputes. Even as the sun dips toward the horizon, the terrain continues to assert its authority. Shadows lengthen across the ridges. Dust from retreating Osage parties drifts toward the Pawnee camp. The river glimmers with reflected firelight. The landscape itself narrates the day's events, encoding victory, caution, and lessons into the soil and grasses. Every footprint, every arrow, every hastily built barricade marks a choice, a misstep, a triumph. Through this first major campaign, the audience sees how intent, terrain, and split-second decisions interact. The Pawnee, guided by scouts like Tyanita, leverage hills, river bends, and marshes to compensate for numerical limitations. The Osage, despite skill and preparation, are constrained by the land they traverse. Nature, far from neutral, dictates outcomes as much as human will. This episode on the Plains illustrates the delicate balance between preparation and improvisation, between observation and action. A single arrow not fired a ridge unobserved, a marsh underestimated all, could have reversed the outcome. History here is visible not in texts or treaties, but in the choreography of people moving through place. Every choice leaving its mark on the map, every misjudgment altering the course of influence and survival. By nightfall, the Pawnee regroup, tally losses few, but meaningful, and reinforce positions. Families return to Tippy's hunters, take stock of supplies, and scouts remain vigilant, understanding that territory is defended not once, but continuously. The map has shifted today. Boundaries, tested strategies executed, and lessons learned. The XOA has occurred, the moment where intent, geography, and human action intersect to determine who holds sway over the plains, for now. And as the night deepens, the fires of the Pawnee camp glow, not just with light, but with affirmation. The land has been defended, the message sent, and the stakes are clear. Tomorrow, the plains will demand vigilance once more, as alliances, rivalries, and resources continue their perpetual dance. The summer sun beats down on the rolling plains, 1202 AD, Republican River, Central Great Plains, modern-day Nebraska, Kansas. Tyanita has returned from scouting, reporting the Osage movements to the Pawnee Council, and the village braces for the consequences. Yet, as the events unfold, the historical record itself begins to fracture. Two voices emerge, telling sharply different tales of the same critical day. The first account comes from the Pawnee Council's oral record, later transcribed decades later by tribal historians and gathered through ceremonial storytelling. In this version, the Osage advance is methodical but cautious, their movement observed well in advance by scouts. Tyanita's alertness and the swift coordination of hunters are credited with preventing unnecessary conflict. According to this narrative, no lives are lost beyond minor injuries. The Pawnee protect both their families and the sacred hunting grounds. Boundaries are defended with precision strategy, informed by intimate knowledge of the terrain and animal behavior. The village acts decisively, responding in harmony, ensuring both survival and the continuation of traditions. The account emphasizes foresight, cooperation, and the strategic genius of the Pawnee scouts. Yet another voice emerges from an Osage warrior's later letter, preserved among clan archives. This narrative paints a different picture. The Osage group claims they were misled by terrain and unexpected Pawnee maneuvers. According to this account, the Pawnee supposedly ambushed a small hunting party, creating unnecessary tension. The letter suggests confusion, misinterpretation of movements, and a lack of clear communication among the Pawnee scouts. From the Osage perspective, what the Pawnee call defense and vigilance appears as calculated aggression, a deliberate display of power intended to intimidate and assert dominance over contested hunting grounds. Casualties, while few, are recorded differently, and the letter implies that the Osage party withdrew reluctantly, feeling that diplomacy was ignored in favor of unilateral assertion of control. The divergence is striking. On the one hand, the Pawnee oral tradition frames the day as a triumph of observation and unity. On the other, the Osage written account emphasizes misjudgment, intimidation, and miscommunication. The discrepancy arises not from entirely separate events, but from perspective and purpose. Each narrative serves a function for the Pawnee. It validates the effectiveness of their social structure, the vigilance of their youth, and the sacredness of their territory. For the Osage, it memorializes cautionary lessons, the unpredictability of neighbors, and the hazards of negotiating space and resources. Geography itself adds layers to the tension. The Republican River bluffs and marshes seen by Pawnee scouts as strategic vantage points might appear to Osage observers as obstructions and traps. The same ridge that shelters the Pawnee hunters provides the Osage with the impression of encirclement. The marshes that channel Osage movement inadvertently reinforce the Pawnee narrative of control, while simultaneously feeding the Osage sense of being manipulated by the terrain. Complicating matters, time and transmission alter perception. Oral accounts emphasize ceremony ritual and communal memory. They are imbued with symbolism, moral lessons, and collective identity. Written records like the Osage Letter prioritize sequence cause-effect and documentation of claims. Both are truthful within their own framework, yet both omit emphasize or reinterpret elements to align with cultural priorities and intended audiences. The Pawnee story highlights heroism and coordination, while the Osage story emphasizes caution and vulnerability. Even small details diverge. In Pawnee accounts, Tyanita's alertness is pivotal. He observes dust clouds, interprets wind direction, and signals hunters effectively. In Osage records, the same scout is described as overzealous, his movements prompting defensive action that escalates tension. A thrown arrow, a snapped branch, the flash of a reflection on a river bend, all are interpreted differently, protection versus provocation. The broader context also matters. The Osage Letter, penned decades later, recalls additional pressures, dwindling bison herds, internal disputes, and the need to assert access to resources. The Pawnee oral record, meanwhile, situates the day within a narrative of continuity, survival, and ancestral guidance. These contextual differences shape how each side perceives actions, motives, and outcomes. Even among Pawnee storytellers, variations exist. Some elders emphasize the wisdom of council deliberations, others highlight Tyanita's courage, while still others focus on family preparedness. The Osage Letter, too, while detailed, reflects individual perspective. Other clan members' accounts suggest more nuanced interpretations of Pawnee actions. What emerges is not a singular truth, but a web of intersecting narratives, each reflecting priorities, biases, and lived experience. The implications for historical understanding are profound. When researchers consult archives, treaties, letters, and oral traditions, they encounter these points of collision. Decisions made by scouts and hunters, once mundane, tactical, and immediate, become the site of historical contestation. Who initiated the first movement? Who interpreted actions correctly? Who bears responsibility for escalating tension? The truth depends on vantage point cultural lens and the transmission of memory. In reconstructing events, historians rely on triangulation, comparing Pawnee oral traditions with Osage letters, consulting environmental clues, analyzing patterns of seasonal movement, and integrating material culture arrows, traps ceremonial markers. Yet even with these methods, contradictions persist. Some argue for a Pawnee-centric reading, others for Osage perspective. Both have merit, both reveal the fragility and contingency of understanding in pre-colonial contexts. This Mothuan conflict of sources is not merely academic. It shapes how future generations interpret territory leadership and interaction on the plains. The Pawnee view themselves as defenders of sacred space, the Osage as prudent navigators of contested lands. Each interpretation informs strategies, alliances, and stories passed down through generations. Memory itself becomes a form of power, determining which version of events is taught, celebrated, or mourned. Even minor actions acquire symbolic weight. The placement of a typus cluster, the arrangement of fires, the path chosen by a hunting party, all become evidence cited in oral and written narratives. The same ridge, the same marsh, the same river bend, literal geography serves as both stage and actor in the unfolding drama. Interpretation shapes reality, and reality informs subsequent strategy, diplomacy, and movement. Ultimately, the audience is left with a fundamental question. Where does the truth lie between these two narratives? Is it in the Pawnee's meticulous observation, the coordination of scouts and families, the safeguarding of hunting grounds? Or is it in the Osage sense of being misled, encircled and forced into retreat. Perhaps the answer is neither singular nor static. Perhaps the truth exists in the interaction itself, in the overlap of perception, intention, and consequence, in the collision of lived experience with recorded memory. The motif of two conflicting accounts resonates beyond this single day. It teaches that history is layered, decisions are made in real time, consequences ripple unpredictably, and memory codifies interpretation. For Tyanita and his village, the day remains vivid actions, reactions, and immediate outcomes are known and lived. For outsiders consulting letters decades later, the story transforms colored by hindsight, cultural emphasis, and individual perspective. Through this lens, we perceive the plains not merely as geography, but as a theater of narrative, where perspective, power, and perception collide. The Osage see a defensive Pawnee force, the Pawnee see a deliberate encroachment, and both read the same ridge, river, and marsh through very different eyes. Each version is valid within its own framework. Each reflects survival strategy and human imperfection. As night descends, the Pawnee settle, families reassured yet alert. Stories circulate around fires detailing actions, bravery, and lessons learned. The Osage record their retreat, recounting the same day's events as missteps and cautionary tales. Both narratives endure, preserved in oral memory and archival letters forming the basis for centuries of interpretation, teaching, and memory. The collision of these sources, the Pawnee oral record and the Osage written letter, reminds us that history is never singular. It is a mosaic, a negotiation between perspectives, a landscape shaped as much by observation and interpretation as by events themselves. For the audience, it invites reflection, which version guides understanding, which illuminates strategy, culture, and intent. And how do discrepancies in record shape the legacy of people and land alike? Late summer 1202 AD, the northern bluffs of the Great Plains near the Republican River, modern-day Nebraska, Kansas. The wind carries the scent of sun-baked grass mingled with smoke from distant fires. Pawnee hunters move quietly through the rolling hills, their sandals brushing against prairie grass, each footstep measured to avoid alerting Osage scouts lingering near the river bends. The sun hangs high, burning the skin beneath wide-brimmed straw hats, while hawks circle lazily above their keen eyes, scanning the terrain as if mirroring the vigilance of the scouts below. Tyanita leads a small party quiver on back bow at the ready. With him are his cousin, older by 2 years, and 2 younger hunters, just recently initiated into scouting duties. Each carries a bundle dried meat, flint water skins, small tools for survival, and signaling. Every rustle in the grass, every snapping twig, every distant bird call is processed potential danger, potential advantage. This march is not casual. It is choreographed precision, born from months of observation and instinct. Across the plain, the Osage move in mirrored stealth. Flags of colored feathers mark their leaders. Hunters whisper directions, hands gesturing, eyes locked on pawns of grass and shadow. Their objective probe Pawnee positions test. Vigilance asserts subtle dominance without provoking outright conflict. Yet the tension is tangible. One misstep could ignite violence that neither side truly desires. As the party climbs a gentle rise, Tyanita notices a glint of sunlight on the river, a reflection of a metal tool carried by an Osage scout. He signals quietly to the others, raise of the hand, pause, shift to the left. The Pawnee adjust. A misstep, a sneeze, a slipping sandal, and the entire delicate balance could unravel. The young scout's pulse quickens. He is aware that observation is action, and action carries consequence. Meanwhile, the village below adjusts its daily life to the unfolding movement. Mothers draw water from the river with children trailing at their heels, carrying small clay pots. Smoke rises from cooking fires, carrying the scent of maize-roasted meat and medicinal herbs. Elders chant softly, offering prayers for protection, guidance, and foresight. Tyanita glimpses them from the ridge. Life continues even amidst tension, ordinary routines intertwined with extraordinary circumstance. The midday sun ignites the turning point. Pawnee scouts, having observed Osage patrols shifting positions, advise the council. Messages travel via signal fires, and runners, temporary withdrawal from exposed hunting grounds. Realignment of lookouts, repositioning of families to secondary encampments. The Pawnee women and elders coordinate rapidly. Children are moved, food stores, protected ceremonial fires, maintained to preserve morale and ritual. Every action has dual purpose, survival, and demonstration of order, competence, and unity. As the day advances, weather intervenes. A sudden gust rises from the west, carrying dust across the plains. Visibility drops. Osage scouts, assuming the Pawnee have repositioned, advance cautiously, inadvertently, funneling themselves toward a narrow bluff passage that the Pawnee had monitored for weeks. From the ridge, Tyanita observes calculating distance, angle, and timing. A small miscalculation delay or overzealous movement could expose the flank or compromise the trap set by the Pawnee. The encounter when it occurs is not a clash of arms, but a tense standoff. Both parties pause, bodies crouched, eyes, scanning hands on bows, arrows ready. The river runs between them, a natural boundary and psychological barrier. Birds scatter from reeds, sending startled cries echoing across the plain, adding tension to an already charged atmosphere. Time slows. Breath is measured. Every participant from scout to hunter feels the weight of potential outcomes. The Pawnee Council uses the pause to make critical decisions. Signals are given, drums muted smoke, adjusted minor movements for deception. The Osage, reading the terrain differently, misinterpret these signs. They withdraw slightly, unsure of the Pawnee strength. The dynamic has shifted. What seemed a standoff becomes a maneuver, terrain observation and timing combining to dictate action without a single violent act. Amid this strategic ballet, Tyanita and his companions navigate human realities. One younger scout stumbles, skin scratched by thorny brush. A water skin bursts, spilling precious supply onto the dirt. Minor incidents threaten to compromise stealth. Yet the older hunters guide them, whispering instructions, correcting movement, reinforcing training. The human element, the need for focused skill and adaptability, is as crucial as geography and strategy. Meanwhile, families watch from teepees and secondary encampments. They cannot see the ridge's details, but they sense the tension. Fires burn, longer meals are delayed, songs softened or silenced. Elders murmur, instructing children to stay close, preparing the next generation to understand vigilance and adaptation. The stakes are taught in real time, woven into daily life as the campaign unfolds. The key pivot occurs when Osage scouts attempt to flank along a marshy tributary of the river. Tyanita notes their movement, relays signals back to the main contingent. Pawnee hunters subtly adjust positions, constraining Osage movement to the river corridor. One misstep by Osage, slipping in mud, misjudging a bank, forces retreat. The balance of control, momentarily in question, tilts decisively in favor of Pawnee. Terrain, timing, and human attention converge to create the XOA point, the moment when foresight and observation convert intent into tangible advantage. Consequences are immediate. The Osage withdraw cautiously, reevaluating territory claims. Pawnee families remain intact, food and resources secured. Scouts, including Tyanita, consolidate observations for the next council meeting. The land itself, with marshes, ridges, and river bends, has dictated action. Human response has reinforced it. Survival strategy and community cohesion intersect visibly. As night falls, the plains settle, but tension lingers. Fires glow across the Pawnee encampment, children sleep fitfully, and scouts maintain vigilance. Stories circulate in whispers, how the young scout identified movement, how the hunters repositioned to exploit terrain, how families adapted without panic. The lesson is clear: knowledge, observation, and coordinated human action are as critical as force or weaponry. Through this extended sequence, the audience witnesses the interplay of intent, terrain, and human adaptation. The Pawnee demonstrate agency. They maneuver, observe, and protect not just land, but life, tradition, and continuity. The Osage, constrained by observation and terrain, respond with caution. Nature, people, and circumstance combine to shape events, history in motion, visible in every footstep, glance, and whisper across the plains. Tomorrow the cycle continues. Patrols, observation, and minor skirmishes maintain the balance. Every action, however small, informs the invisible map of influence. The plains are alive not only with animals, wind, and sun, but with choices, calculations, and human presence. Each moment, each decision carries weight. The story of this summer of Tyanita and the Pawnee is being written not only in letters or oral tradition, but in the texture of the land itself. Late afternoon, 1202 AD, Pawnee territory, along the western banks of the Republican River. The sun casts long shadows over the plains, painting the grass gold and amber, but the warmth belies tension, thick as smoke. For weeks, Tyanita and his fellow scouts have observed Osage movements, calculated patrol routes, and relayed information to the council. Today, the culmination arrives, the moment when preparation, observation, and circumstance converge into a sequence of irreversible events. From dawn, the village operates in heightened alert. Smoke signals, subtle drumming, and whispered messages ripple across the camp. Families relocate tents closer to defensive positions. Water and food caches are moved to secondary sites. Children, aware of unusual urgency, huddle under the supervision of mothers, learning early the rhythms of vigilance and survival. Every individual, from elders to scouts, contributes to the collective orchestration. Tyanita ascends a ridge with a small contingent bow, ready eyes scanning the horizon. Across the plains, the Osage make their approach larger than previous parties' coordinated assertive. Their intent is unmistakable: claim contested hunting grounds, test Pawnee resolve, and pressure the council into concession. The first encounter occurs not through violence, but through observation and signaling. Dust rises from the Osage flank. A glimmer of sunlight on a spear confirms movement. Tyanita signals small feathered arrow, raise subtle foot movement, communicating position and perceived strength. Pawnee hunters reposition along ridges and bluffs, covering river crossings and marsh edges. Every step is deliberate, every pause strategic. Mid-morning brings the point of rupture. A young Osage warrior miscalculates the Pawnee observation post, stepping into the line of sight of several scouts. Misunderstanding the movement as an attack, the Pawnee release warning shots, sending the first physical message across the plains. Chaos erupts in microcosm, a cascade of reactions, some defensive, some cautious, but all irrevocable. Families below witness the ripple, children cry. Dogs bark, fires flare, sending smoke twisting higher into the sky. Mothers pull children into teepees. Elders adjust ceremonial fires to maintain signals of vigilance. The interaction, though, brief, marks the first irreversible escalation. The Osage realize they have underestimated Pawnee readiness. The Pawnee understand that any hesitation now could invite loss of territory, honor, and safety. The terrain asserts itself. Marshy lowlands funnel retreating Osage into narrow corridors. Ridges expose advancing hunters to line-of-sight observation. Each ridge, river bend, and tall grass patch becomes both shield and constraint. Mist rising from morning dew transforms into vapor haze under the sun, masking movement for some, revealing it for others. Nature, silent yet authoritative, dictates choices as much as human will. By midday, the critical decision point arrives. Pawnee hunters and scouts, guided by Tyanita's observations, converge on Osage scouts trapped along the marsh edge. Arrows are fired not to maim, but to drive movement force, repositioning, and assert control. The Osage respond, retreating through the corridor, but the momentum is lost. Boundaries have been drawn, lines of influence redrawn, and territory is now defended through action, observation, and consequence. The council convenes rapidly. Elders debate follow-up measures, weighing continued pursuit against strategic restraint. Every suggestion carries implications for alliances, future hunts, and the perception of Pawnee strength. Tyanita reports minute details, positions, timing, river crossing conditions, and potential vulnerabilities. The council's decisions, though immediate, will echo across seasons, shaping resource access and intertribal relations. As evening descends, the sequence reaches irreversible closure. The Osage withdraw beyond the ridges, regrouping in territory less familiar to them. Pawnee families return to reinforce teepees. Children are soothed, but the lesson lingers. Vigilance, coordination, and understanding terrain are essential to survival. The land itself, with every marsh ridge and river bend, carries evidence of the confrontation. Footprints, bent grass, broken reeds, markers of action frozen in time. Historical records fragment here. Pawnee oral tradition later recalls the day with focus on strategy, courage, and unity, emphasizing Tyanita's keen observation and the effectiveness of the scout network. Osage accounts recorded in clan letters decades later describe miscommunication, underestimation, and forced withdrawal, suggesting that escalation was avoidable, but perception dictated response. The physical terrain, the sun, the wind, and even the timing of animal movement contributed to a reality experienced differently by each side. The point of no return is evident not in grand gestures, but in cumulative micro-actions. An arrow released, a signal; misread, a ridge miscalculated. Once the first warning shots fly, once the Osage are funneled into the marsh corridor, the moment cannot be undone. The river ridges and plains have witnessed the collision of intent, action, and consequence. History in this sense is sealed in the movements of people through space, not only in texts or later narratives. By nightfall, the plains settle under deepening shadows. Fires glow across the Pawnee camp. Families share quiet meals, recounting details, reinforcing lessons learned. Scouts remain on alert, knowing that territory, resource access, and influence are provisional. Yet today, the Pawnee have maintained both life and honor. The Osage retreat, regroup, and record their own version of events. Two narratives persist, reflecting different perspectives, but converging on the irrevocable shift in control and influence. The audience is left with the stark awareness that Diem Kung Kwai is not a single act, but a confluence of observation, terrain, timing, and human decision-making. One misread shadow, one strategic insight, one gust of wind, or one signal misinterpreted can change the course of lives, alliances, and territorial authority permanently. And so the stage is set. The Pawnee defend their sacred plains. The Osage learn the consequences of miscalculation. The land itself records every footstep signal and decision. Today, the balance of power has shifted irrevocably. The horizon holds both promise and threat, and the plains will remember this sequence in stories, songs, and oral memory for generations to come. Winter 1203 AD, in the wake of the confrontation along the Republican River Pawnee Territory, modern-day Nebraska, Kansas. The plains are quiet under a thin layer of snow, softening the contours of riverbanks and bluffs. Yet beneath this calm, the ripple of change spreads through every tipi, every hunting trail, every family. The encounter with the Osage has left more than memory. It has redrawn invisible boundaries, reshaped alliances, and transformed daily life. In the short term, consequences are immediate. Within the first year, Pawnee families relocate temporary villages to more defensible sites, along tributaries of the Republican River. Teepees are dismantled and rebuilt, food stores transported, water sources secured. Tayanita, recognized for his vigilance, helps elders select locations that balance safety with access to hunting grounds. The adjustment is practical, but deeply felt. Children travel longer distances to learn survival skills. Elders adapt. Ceremonial routines and sacred sites are temporarily abandoned to maintain spiritual alignment. Over the next 5 years, social and educational changes emerge. Young scouts inspired by Tayanita's early contributions receive structured training in tracking observation and negotiation. Families establish semi-permanent settlements near river confluences, balancing safety and resource access. Ceremonial cycles are modified to accommodate new locations. Sacred grounds, once central to daily life, are visited seasonally. The Pawnee village becomes more structured in response to external pressures, codifying routines and leadership to protect autonomy while navigating contested landscapes. Over decades, the legacy of the confrontation is embedded in both memory and geography. Hills, marshes, and ridges acquire new names, reflecting pivotal events. Tayanite's Ridge Council Marsh, not only marking physical locations, but also symbolizing strategic decisions and survival lessons. Previously contested territories are remembered in stories and songs, teaching subsequent generations about vigilance, cooperation, and the costs of miscalculation. Influence among neighboring confederacies stabilizes, though subtle rivalries persist, shaping migration patterns, trade routes, and intertribal relations for years to come. Material culture reflects these shifts as well. Teepees are redesigned for rapid assembly and mobility. Hunting tools are refined for efficiency and portability. Signal fires and ceremonial markers integrate lessons learned from observation and previous campaigns. Even the youngest children internalize strategy and rapid response through play, seasonal work, and participation in rituals. Survival, once reactive, becomes proactive adaptation, informed by collective memory of the confrontation along the river. The Osage adapt in turn. Scouts and hunters note the Pawnee's coordination and vigilance, and future strategies are informed by this observation, greater caution, preparation, and intelligence gathering. Intertribal dialogue continues tenuous but functional, agreements and boundaries are maintained, yet vigilance remains inseparable from survival. By 20 years later, the new map exists not on paper, but in practice. Routes, campsites, hunting grounds, and ceremonial spaces now carry the imprint of conflict and adaptation. Decisions made during that pivotal summer of 1202 AD echo across seasons, generations, and social structures. The Pawnee children, like Tayanita, once learned early that survival is inseparable from observation, coordination, and careful navigation of both human and natural landscapes. The aftermath manifests in 3 principal ways: territorial reorganization, relocation of temporary villages, and long-term stabilization of hunting grounds and river access points, establishing clear boundaries with neighboring confederacies. Social and educational adaptation, structured training for scouts, adjustments to ceremonial cycles, and codification of routines to ensure vigilance and rapid response. Legacy of vigilance, oral traditions, naming of key landmarks, and strategic awareness embedded in community memory, teaching future generations observation, cooperation, and adaptation. The map has changed, life has adapted, and the lessons of that critical summer continue to shape the plains, the people, and the Pawnee story for generations to come. Decades have passed since the confrontation along the Republican River in 1202 AD, yet the plains continue to carry memory. Among the Pawnee, recollections are not written in ink, but in song and story, and in the careful naming of land. Elders recount to children the seasonal hunts, the ridges and marshes, and the river crossings where scouts like Tayanita once observed, calculated, and guided their people. These are living memories encoded in rhythm, movement, and place. One detail that endures is the practice of seasonal scouting rituals. Each spring, families send young scouts along the same ridges Tayanita once patrolled. They carry bows, sinew-strung arrows, and small talismans, a continuation of ancestral practice. The ritual is not a reenactment, it is a pedagogy. Scouts learn observation, patience, and attentiveness to terrain and wind. They learn that survival is inseparable from awareness, and that understanding the land requires attentive eyes, memory, and respect. Another surviving element is the naming of landscapes. The bluffs, the marshes, and river bends bear the original Pawnee names preserved orally through generations. Go Tayaneti marks the ridge where observation changed the course of a season. Dam Hoi Dong recalls the marsh used for council deliberations. These names do more than locate. They encode decisions, events, and communal values. Through place names, the community carries the past forward into every conversation, every lesson, every journey. Even children who have never witnessed conflict learn geography as intertwined with history, culture, and human adaptation. The third enduring trace is the songs and oral histories tied to the events. Chanting cycles accompany planting, hunting, and ceremonial gatherings. Lyrics tell of observation, cooperation, and survival without dramatizing violence or glorifying confrontation. They emphasize coordination, vigilance, and memory, practical lessons embedded in melody. These songs persist in quiet cadence, linking generations and preserving the strategies, choices, and adaptive practices of ancestors. Through these elements, one sees how the Pawnee remember without mythologizing, preserving evidence of the past while integrating it into daily life. Memory is both functional and cultural. It instructs as much as it commemorates. The land itself, the ridges, rivers, and marshes, becomes a repository of knowledge. The Pawnee, by walking, observing, naming, and singing, keep the map of influence, vigilance, and adaptation alive. The lessons are subtle, scholarly, rather than moralistic. Observation is valued over heroism, coordination over triumph, memory over spectacle. These remnants teach that human survival on the plains depended as much on understanding the environment and social networks as on conflict or force. One learns from the Pawnee example that land, people, and memory are inseparable. The geography carries lessons. The people carry stories. The stories inform movement, decision-making, and future generations. Communities continue to use the same river crossings, navigate familiar marsh corridors, and maintain seasonal patterns of hunting and gathering, all informed by collective memory. Ceremonial fires once used to signal vigilance or readiness still burn in prescribed rhythms, linking past observation to present-day awareness. Children internalize strategy, observation, and adaptability, not through textbooks but through living participation in these cycles. The environment itself becomes both teacher and witness. Even as modern changes have altered portions of the plains, these three traces: ritual, scouting, place names, and song cycles persist. They demonstrate that memory can survive disruption and maintaining continuity in culture, geography, and social structure. In observing how these practices endure, scholars gain insight into the interplay between land-human activity and communal memory, showing that historical knowledge is not only preserved in texts, but also in the ways people inhabit, interpret, and interact with their environment. The Pawnee do not speak of past confrontation as tragedy or heroism. They speak of adaptation, awareness, and continuity. Through their recollections, it becomes evident that history is active landforms, practices and memories work together to shape decisions and sustain community across generations. One can see the past not as a story of conquest, but as a map of human engagement, observation, and resilience quietly guiding the people who remain. In asking, how do they remember? What can we learn from land, people, and memory? The answer is embedded in practice. Scouting, naming, and song carry information and instruction. They preserve continuity of life and culture, ensuring that the lessons of past seasons, the choices of scouts like Tayanita, and the careful observation of the plains endure not as legend or spectacle, but as functional living knowledge. The plains themselves remain vast and unbroken, but the invisible traces, the new map of vigilance, strategy, and memory, persist quietly shaping each generation's interaction with land and community. The Pawnee's story, told through what they still do, what they still name, and what they still sing, is the living legacy of a people whose survival depended on attention, coordination, and memory, and whose echoes continue to inform life on the plains today. Through ritual, scouting, and stories, the Pawnee kept their history alive. What story from your culture or family has survived through memory rather than written records? Tell us your story.